was a fearless commander who helped liberate Zimbabwe. Yet, after independence, his own country turned against him. He was accused of plotting a coup against Prime Minister Robert Mugabe. The Supreme Court declared him not guilty. He was cleared of all charges. Yet, the government detained him anyway. He would spend years in prison despite having been declared not guilty. Legally speaking, he was paying for a crime he didn't commit. Betrayed, broken, yet revolutionary until the very end. And at his funeral, Joshua Nkomo asked a question that still remains relevant to this day. He said, "We who fought against these things now practice them. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, we are going to talk about the story of Lookout Masuku. It's a story of pain and anguish, a story of betrayal and a stolen future. One that leaves you asking, what could have been? Is this what Robert Mugabe meant when he called GUKURAHUNDI a moment of madness? Well, fellow Sazaiters, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, wasinamalites, warikudyarais, never sinamarites. Welcome to the special report. Lookout Masuku was born in Gwanda on 7 April 1940. At this time, Zimbabwe was still known as Southern Rhodesia, and its prime minister was Godfrey Huggins, the longest-serving Rhodesian prime minister. Masuku's teenage years coincided with the beginning of liberation politics in Rhodesia, with the first national black political party called the ANC being formed in 1957. This was the era of black consciousness. Many African heroes made their names during this period. These men inspired a whole generation of young Africans to rise up against white minority rule. One such young man was Lookout Masuku, who soon became a political activist. He left Southern Rhodesia in the early 60s to join the armed struggle under ZAPU. He received military training in the Soviet Union, which he completed in 1964. Masuku quickly gained a reputation as a fearless fighter and was soon appointed an instructor responsible for training fighters. He was later appointed a commissar. A commissar is an organizer. This was a very powerful military position during the liberation struggle. In June 1978, after the death of the ZIPRA commander, Alfred Nikita Mangena, Lookout Masuku took over. He was appointed ZIPRA commander. That means he was in charge of the ZAPU army in the last 2 years of the armed struggle. After the war, Lookout Masuku played an important role in containing his soldiers and ensuring discipline among his troops during the ceasefire period following the Lancaster House Agreement, in which all parties agreed to lay down their weapons and participate in the 1980 elections. Lookout Masuku led the first ZIPRA delegation back into the country in December 1979. The ZIPRA delegation was the first to arrive in Rhodesia, landing in the morning. Solomon Mujuru and his Zanla delegation arrived later. Remarkably, Lookout Masuku returned to the airport to receive the Zanla delegation. It was on that day that this photograph was taken. You can see right there Masuku and Mujuru holding hands as they walked in full view of the media and thousands of supporters who had come to witness the arrival of their national heroes. Who would have predicted that things would turn out the way they did for Lookout Masuku barely 3 years later? After the 1980 elections, which were won by ZANU-PF, Robert Mugabe faced the difficult task of creating a national army from 3 rival forces: ZIPRA, Zanla, and the Rhodesian military. Armies that deeply hated each other and whose political leadership had long-standing vendettas dating back to the 1960s. This was no easy task for any president or prime minister. But Mugabe won international admiration for choosing national unity and pragmatism. His policy of reconciliation helped prevent an immediate disaster in Zimbabwe. However, a failure to maintain such a good gesture soon plunged the nation into chaos. But before we talk about the chaos, let's look at Mugabe's pragmatism in 1980. He established a Joint High Command. The Joint High Command was the highest military structure in Zimbabwe at the time and was led by the Rhodesian military general, Peter Walls. It was called Joint because it included members of Zanla, ZIPRA, and the Rhodesian military. Masuku and Dabengwa represented ZIPRA, while Mujuru and Josiah Tungamirai represented Zanla. This structure guided the integration process until August 1981, when the ZDF was formally established.
In terms of the constitution, and with effect from the 1st of August 1981, the Prime Minister is appointed Lieutenant General A.L.C. McLean to be the Commander of Combined Operations, and that as a condition of this appointment, he will at all times have the title of and exercise the functions of Commander of the Defense Forces of Zimbabwe in the rank of General, which means Lieutenant General McLean is now full General. Lieutenant General Rex Nongo has been appointed to succeed General McLean as Commander of the Zimbabwe National Army, and Lieutenant General L.K.V. Masuku has been appointed Deputy Commander of the Zimbabwe National Army. These changes have been brought about now that the integration operation is coming to a close, to permit a clear-cut chain of command to be defined.
So there you have it. In August 1981, Sandy McLean became the first ZDF commander. On the same day, Mujuru was appointed ZNA commander, deputized by Lookout Masuku. The Air Force, police, and the CIO all remained under the leadership of Rhodesian officers. In government, Robert Mugabe allowed ZAPU members into his cabinet, even though he didn't need to do so, because his party had won enough seats to govern on its own. Moreover, the position of president was initially offered to Joshua Nkomo, but he declined, saying that he wasn't interested in being a constitutional figurehead. The Zimbabwean presidency at the time was ceremonial. Nkomo preferred a ministerial position and requested one of the security ministries in order to make ZIPRA feel included. Robert Mugabe agreed and gave him the Ministry of Home Affairs, which was responsible for the police. This won Mugabe praise all over the world. But as the world was praising Robert Mugabe's policy of reconciliation, trouble was brewing within the military barracks. Remember, after the Lancaster House Conference, ZIPRA and ZANLA guerrillas were put in separate holding camps, which were called assembly points, waiting to be integrated into the Zimbabwe National Army after the elections. However, when the integration process started, the deep-rooted vendettas between ZIPRA and ZANLA sometimes carried the day. Tensions existed on both sides. Both armies were suspicious of each other. In September 1980, General Walls, who had been the overall military leader in Zimbabwe, was fired after criticizing government abroad. His removal left Zimbabwe without an overall military commander, leading to frequent disagreements between ZIPRA and ZANLA. Robert Mugabe appointed Emmerson Mnangagwa to chair the Joint High Command. With this appointment, ED was effectively filling in for a military general. This created further tension. Many saw it as Mugabe's way of influencing decisions of the Joint High Command in favor of ZANU-PF. Furthermore, the appointment of Lookout Masuku as Mjuru's deputy in 1981 meant that for the third time in 4 years, ZIPRA was placed under the authority of ZANLA. The first time was in 1976 under ZIPA, when Alfred Nikita Mangena was made Mjuru's junior despite being more senior to him. The second time was during the Lancaster House talks, when Tongogara became the overall leader of the Patriotic Front military delegation. Of course, the third time was when Lookout Masuku became Mjuru's deputy. The attitude and reckless comments by ZANU-PF bigwigs did not help the situation either. For example, on 8 November 1980, the Treasurer General of ZANU-PF, Enos Nkala, addressed a rally attacking Joshua Nkomo and ZAPU. This rally was held in Bulawayo, the epicenter of ZAPU support. The following day, Nkala addressed another rally at White City Stadium, where violence broke out. Later that day, a full-scale battle erupted in Entumbane. The fighting was between ZIPRA and ZANLA. The clashes lasted for 2 days and radicalized many ZIPRA soldiers. They were radical enough to the point that by June 1982, a group of ZIPRA soldiers serving in the ZNA actually conducted a failed attack on the residences of Robert Mugabe and Enos Nkala. The situation was fast getting out of hand and needed a careful handling. But way before the failed attack on Mugabe's home, some ZIPRA officers had already started leaving the army and joining the ANC military wing, Umkhonto weSizwe. Some went into the bush and became dissidents, often committing despicable crimes. The government accused ZAPU and the ZIPRA leadership of sponsoring them. Although Joshua Nkomo publicly spoke out against dissident violence almost from the time it began, his words had no apparent impact. Many in ZANU-PF viewed the lack of effect of his words as confirmation that ZAPU was behind the growing violence. Nkomo was then demoted from the powerful Ministry of Home Affairs, which seemed to worsen the situation, with yet another crisis surfacing as Zipra and Zanla once again clashed in Entumbane, bringing the country mind-numbingly close to a civil war. More and more Zipra officers deserted the army, often taking their weapons with them. On the 6th of February 1982, weapons were discovered hidden on Zapu farms. The authorities said that these weapons were being hidden by Zipra for use in overthrowing the government. Nkomo and the Zipra leadership denied any knowledge of these weapons. 11 days later, Joshua Nkomo was fired from government, but he wasn't arrested. He was fired along with all the Zapu ministers. Less than a month later, on the 11th of March 1982, Dumiso Dabengwa and Lookout Masuku were arrested on charges of plotting a coup. This was in connection with the weapons that had been discovered on Zapu farms. In 1983, these men were declared not guilty by the Supreme Court. They were cleared of all charges. However, the government refused to release them and kept them detained under emergency rules. They stayed in prison for 4 more years, even though the highest court in the land had declared them not guilty. Legally speaking, they were paying for a crime they didn't commit. According to Dumiso Dabengwa, while in prison, a government delegation visited them. It was led by E.D. Mnangagwa, who at the time was the Minister of State Security responsible for the CIO. Dabengwa added that the delegation offered them freedom, but only if they joined ZANU-PF. Both men refused. By 1986, Lookout Masuku was very ill. The government released him on the 11th of March 1986 because of his poor health. He was admitted to Parerenyata Hospital in Harare. Sadly, he died a month later, on the 5th of April, 2 days before his 46th birthday. The official cause of death is cryptococcal meningitis. He was denied national hero status. Although Lookout Masuku was no longer in prison when he died, Joshua Nkomo did not consider him truly free. He said the following words at Masuku's funeral: "I say he died in prison because he died on that bed on which he was detained. It was not possible for him to leave that bed, and it was not possible for you to see him. Therefore I say he died in prison. Why should men like Lookout and Dumiso, after being found innocent of any wrongdoing by the highest court in the land, remain detained? When we ask, we get the same answer from the minister as we used to get from the Smith regime. Mafela, Lookout, after all his sacrifices, died a pauper in our own hands. We cannot blame colonialism and imperialism for this tragedy. We who fought against these things now practice them. Why? In 1994, 8 years after his death, Lookout Masuku was finally declared a national hero. In 2017, the government of Zimbabwe started renaming several military barracks to honor heroes of the liberation struggle. The KG6 military barracks were renamed Josiah Magama Tungogara Barracks. Similarly, the Lowland Barracks near Bulawayo were renamed Lookout Masuku Barracks. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of General Lookout Mafela Kalisabantu Vumindaba Masuku, the last commander of Zipra. May his soul rest in peace. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.